Sam Gore is actually an executive director of the Sustainable F Project, an organization based in Florida, USA. Sam's academic background includes engineering and computer science, studies at the Purdue University. However, his professional journey took him to a large national bank where he advanced to the position of VP of Business Development. It was during this time at the bank that Sam discovered his passion for internet, particularly after helping the bank establish their first website and online mortgage application. After leaving the bank, Sam ventured into publishing and marketing companies. He's helped numerous companies with their marketing and digital marketing needs. He successfully founded many companies during the last decade, including one that grew to become one of the fastest growing economic consulting and remediation groups in America. He has sold the last 5 companies, including one a public company. Today, Sam is a farmer and has taken on his most ambitious role as Executive Director of Sustainable F Project. He leads the organization in building a collection of individual projects that aim to educate, inspire, and equip people to live a more sustainable life and safeguard the planet for future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting on achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture, our speaker, Sam Gore.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And like I said before, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time. This morning watching everybody. So I'll just jump right in and share my screen here. So today I'm going to be talking about achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture. It is one of the most pressing challenges facing our world today, achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture. UN Sustainable Development Goal 2 covers a range of topics related to ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition, empowering small-scale farmers, and promoting sustainable agriculture. The SDG 2 is a little unique because it's an individual and a corporate goal. It also is linked to other ones, other goals. 1, no poverty; 3, good health and well-being; 5, gender equality; 8, decent work; 11, sustainable communities; 12, responsible consumption and less waste; 13, climate action; and 15, life on the land. Hunger is defined as a condition in which a person cannot eat sufficient food to meet basic nutritional needs for a sustained period of time. Target 2.2 of this SDG goal 2 really looks at the state of nutrition in the population, food insecurity that can lead to hunger, but also poor diets of cheap food with low nutritional value, which will actually lead to obesity. All right, as we all know, the food security is a basic human right, and yet it's one that is denied to millions of people around the world. At the same time, unsustainable agriculture practices are damaging our environment, threatening the livelihoods of small-scale farmers, and contributing to climate change. So my vision statement is this. My vision is the world is that it would be cheaper to buy food that makes us healthy than it is to purchase food that makes us sick. And when it is for everybody to buy that healthy food. So we got some challenges in doing so. When the United Nations did this in 2015, for a decade before that, we were actually going down the people being hungry, and we were moving down but at 2015 we had our first ever increase in rate of hunger. And with COVID increasing, that even more. And we are on track to unfortunately now hit 1 billion people hungry by 2030. One of the tragic ironies of all of this is that the global production matches, if not exceeds, global needs. The world grows enough food for all of us to have that, but it's maldistributed, commodified, subsidized, and unfortunately weaponized. Distribution falters, the supply chain breaks, and then 30% of food productions now go to waste. Another part of it is the humanitarian side of it. Some people think that food security is the humanitarian side, and they see things like the World Food Program was awarded the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize, and it was a well-earned triumph for the world. The award spotlighted the UN's agency's efforts over a decade to combat hunger and famine across the globe and prevent use of food as a weapon of war. Right now, we're hovering right about 800 million people food insecure. So the WFP work is never been so important, but the humanitarian intervention alone, while critical and necessary, is not sufficient. It reacts to and mitigates, but does not solve the underlying cause for insecurity. I attended the global Clinton Global Initiative in 2013. During that conference, the singer Bono from YouTube was speaking on stage with Bill Clinton and a few other people around the world. And he was looking back at the decades of humanitarian aid that he believed that we actually did more long-term damage because it wasn't sustainable and only allowed handouts instead of hand-ups. The move beyond humanitarian response and look for solutions to systematic hunger in a world of plenty is the task at hand. Another issue that we're having is that there's over 300,000 species of plants on Earth. At least half of them are edible to the humans. And according to the International Development Research Center, modern agriculture has now become so concentrated on a very small number of those plants. Now we're down to about 150 plant species that the farms use across the world. What's even more scary is that only 12 of those plant species provide 3/4 of the world's food. And even worse than that, half of the world's food comes from a limited number of varieties of 3 mega crops: rice, wheat, and corn. 50% of our food goes to those three. But the problem that we have is now that we have a handful of corporations that own intellectual property of those seeds. So you can start seeing some issues that we have. Those handful of the corporations own the intellectual property rights for those seeds across the globe, seeds that need the corporations' chemicals to work to kill, to work, but then they also kill the soil. Then those handful of corporations use it to sell to other handful of corporations to make cheap processed food with little or no nutrient value. The connections between environmental degradation and food insecurity is super apparent. Most of the the world's most food insecure people live in the rural areas that suffer from deforestation, soil erosion, desertification, and degraded pastures and water resources. According to the National Intelligence Council, about 25% of our usable global soil worldwide is highly degraded now, and often requires large supplements of fertilizers and other inputs to even remain productive. All of these misuses cause the soils to turn into dirt that can't pull carbon out of the air, carbon that plants need to help grow. That dirt has very few living organisms and really no nutrients because the chemicals and pesticides which means plants are less nutrient. Soil started eroding. Um, and what happens is this creates a lot of carbon in the air. Feeding GMO grain to cows and chickens, grains that both animals do not eat in the wild and shouldn't eat at all, causes less nutrient meat, and those animals release methane into the air. By subsidizing the omega-3 crops that are sold to companies making processed food with little or no nutrients that are cheaper to buy than healthy food. And the vicious cycle keeps continuing, going and going and going. So how do we move forward? How do we achieve the food security and promote sustainable? Good news, there's tons of solutions out there. And we've learned about some of those, about the AI and the cooperation that we have on there. But it is up to us, the community, the global community, to work together to implement them. Diplomacy, international cooperation, bring people together like never before will help achieve food security and promote sustainable agriculture. But we need to reframe, rethink, and reform the food system from global to the local. This is the only, this and only this is the way we're going to solve the world hunger issue. We need a grassroots movement, a campaign that will allow everyday people, farmers, executives, entrepreneurs, lawmakers, and businesses to go and learn and love on people from around the world. And then that's when the change will happen. We have huge mountains that we need fixed. Policies will help to fix the laws and policies that stop the IP rights of seeds going across where the global citizens do not own the seeds for the foods that we eat. Another one is we must recognize that achieving food security requires a holistic approach. It's not just about increasing food production, because we have enough food. It needs to be more nutrient dense, less subsidies on those omega-3 crops, and more subsidies to the local farmers around the world. Back away and even penalize use of GMOs where they can only utilize that and they own the rights to that. Understand the circular connection between healthy soil and healthy air that correlates to healthy food. Diplomacy can help to achieve food security by promoting policies that support small-scale producers. You see, small-scale producers are the backbone of the world's food systems, producing up to 80% of the food consumed in developing countries. Governments can provide subsidies and other forms that support small-scale farmers, working with the private sectors to create markets for the products, can create agreements for security, providing access to credit, technical assistance, and support the needs of conflict-affected and displaced citizens. At the same time, we must promote sustainable agriculture practices that promote long-term environmental sustainability and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These practices are not only damaging to the environment, but they also threaten the livelihoods of small-scale farmers who rely on natural resources to produce those crops. One approach to sustainable agriculture that has gained increased attention in the recent years is agroecology. Agroecology is the agriculture approach that integrates ecological principles with food production. Basically, what it is just watching the world, watching the globe, watching Mother Earth, and seeing how it works and working in harmony with them. We can create more nutrient dense by doing this. We'll be able to gain soil. We'll be able to gain the things that we need so we can work in harmony with the natural environment. This will help to heal the land and clean the air and bring nutrients back to the food that we eat. We also must recognize that achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture requires a long-term investment and a long-term perspective. It's not enough to implement short-term solutions to address immediate needs. We have to see for the long term and hand up. Governments NGOs, international organizations, the private sector have provided a foundation, but yet it's still not enough. Ground up approaches, grassroots movements, bringing individuals, entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite executive, farmers together to listen, share, and network. If not, the goal to end global hunger by 2030 will continue to fall farther out of our reach. So my simple definition of diplomacy that I always share is this. I believe it's a long-term art of human interaction. That interaction hopefully turns into trust. That trust can then move mountains. Some people say that this is way too large, way too huge to achieve. But let me share a story that happened actually to me. In the U.S., there was a small airline company that started doing volunteerism. This company took entrepreneurs, business owners, doctors, executives, and just normal people and sent them around the world to volunteer to get to know the local communities and have a little vacation. One trip was to El Salvador. One of my business partners went to the trip to El Salvador, loved it, kept going back. During the time he was there, he met a young girl that helped do some translation for them. Over the next 5 or 6 years, they kept on contact with this girl. What's amazing about it is when we were going back to El Salvador, she had mentioned, you need to meet my uncle. So my partner asked, well, what does your uncle do? Well, he's a president. So my friend actually just thought, well, he was a president of a corporation that might be able to work and do some things. Well, it actually ended up being the president of El Salvador. So when we got there, he invited us to the presidential palace. He knew what we were doing for the people of El Salvador without asking for anything back. During that time period, we got to know that he loved cars and racing. So my friend jokingly said, hey, we're from Indianapolis, Indiana. They have the Indianapolis 500 race coming up soon. And without blinking an eye, the president couldn't come, but the first lady said, I would love to come see this. You see, the United States have been trying to get people from El Salvador, the president and first lady, to come to America for a long time. For almost a decade. And yet just happened to be there, asked the question. The problem was the Indianapolis 500 was about 2 weeks away. And so we had a lot to do. So we had to create a group, had to figure out what's going on, call in the Secret Service, some security people. They're trying to figure out how we're just us normal people able to get this dignitary to come. Luckily, we got in contact to the owner of the Indianapolis 500. He got us to Roger Penske, who owns some of the race cars, and gave us a suite to go in. But people kept on wondering how we did this. What magic did we have? But it was so simple. It was so simple. It was just an act of diplomacy. We just listened. We listened when we were down in El Salvador. We cared. We shared without wanting anything in return. We built that level of trust that spurred on some major projects in El Salvador and many partnerships. We immediately brought Millard Fuller. He was the founder of Habitat for Humanity. And he came and started building homes in El Salvador that he had been trying to get in to help build homes in El Salvador, never been able to. This is a gentleman that gave away all his money, all his possessions, started homes all around the world, and actually housed over 500,000 people in his 20-some years of Habitat for Humanity. You know, that trust and mutual respect is still there today. Just a group of regular people from the Midwest of the United States of America hanging out, doing things in El Salvador, just from listening and loving on people. So I'll conclude by this. As global citizens, we have the role to play in achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture. whether they're supporting local food systems, reducing food waste, and advocating policies that support small scale farmers. We can all make a difference. Let's work together, diplomats, entrepreneurs, farmers, and everyday people, to ensure everyone has access to food they need to live healthy, productive lives and create a more sustainable future for all. Let us not forget the words of Jacques Diouf, the Director General of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. He said, "Hunger is not an issue of charity, it's an issue of justice. Food is a fundamental and sacred right. Those who produce it for us deserves our greatest reverence." And with that, I end.
Wow. I just love that final quote there. Hunger is not an issue of charity, but an issue of justice. And,
Yes.
those who produce deserve to be taken care of. I'm just, there's so much to take on from your presentation there. And the few things that sound like, reframe, rethink, reform, from global to local. We've been talking about global diplomacy, where food production is actually not just done globally, but local, to feed the people locally. I mean, we recognize what happened when a Russian-Ukrainian war took place. Food security became a very, very big issue. So I think what you said is so, so key. We need to rethink about food agriculture and as food diplomacy or agricultural diplomacy, and how that can help bring food security globally. Another thing that you mentioned was developing long-term trust and maintaining, these long-term trusts with international and local communities, because that's the only way we can bring sustainable agriculture. And I like what you call agroecology. Can you expand a little bit on that? Bringing food with nutrients to bear. But I just love the idea of it. But can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, the agroecology is just very simple of just looking at nature, looking at how it works and kind of getting out of its way. We have to produce en masse, but but basically what we're trying to do is to gain better soil by having those microbes inside that soil. Those they literally eat the carbon out of the air and bring it right back into the plants, and it just keeps on going. So we, instead of producing all of this corn continually at the same land and same land and same land, we work with the ecology, we work with the mother nature, we work how God intended all of this to work and play out inside of this. And so when we get out of the way, it's amazing. And in doing research for the last few years, we've been able to grow topsoil on clay. We were able to start growing beautiful topsoil on sand, and utilizing nature and using what nature utilizes. If you go into a forest, it's beautiful. You go into a rainforest, it's absolutely gorgeous inside that rainforest, but there's no humans doing anything. But there's that circular societal, that circular nutrition, where the things die and go onto the ground, and it keeps absorbing back and forth. A tree, you look at a tree and you see the circular nutrition that the tree gives to itself with dropping the leaves, and the leaves go into the soil. And so we just have to get away, or get out of the way and start utilizing the natural resources that we have around the globe. And in doing so, we have nutrient-rich foods, which will then help with the education, which will then help people start learning and growing. And it's a beautiful system that we've just kind of overcomplicated in life.
Excellent, excellent. There's a question here. He says, how can climate change influence food security and sustain digital marketing? By Donatus again. Yeah.
Yeah, the climate change can really do. It's one of the ones of what kind of started some of the climate change and how to end with climate change, and it kind of goes right back into the earth and the food production and everything. The climate change can wreak havoc on the global food production, and we're kind of almost doing it to ourselves, because once we start spraying the soil, this beautiful living thing, with chemicals, it goes to basically dirt, and there's no nutrients inside there. There's nothing that we can do, and we have to keep pumping in the chemicals, and that chemicals then starts going down the road where of erosion and everything, where it starts creating almost climate change in and of itself. And then now there's so much carbon in the air, because the soil has been just totally demolished of any of the living nutrients that can pull that carbon, that needs to pull that carbon out of the air. And so we fix the soil, we fix the air. And so it's a nasty system that we have slowly, continually kept growing. And everybody thought the GMO seeds were going to help. And in the very beginning, the very first part of it, it did look like it would grow some more production. But unfortunately, everything that has done has just continually created more and more climate change. And it totally wreaks havoc on local food production, because if you knock one chain out of that supply, then things start crumbling up. And we saw it during COVID when borders were shut down. That is why we increased so dramatically, hundreds of millions of people hungry, because we shut down the borders, and we didn't have that local food right there ready for people.
That's so true. Absolutely true there. It's a pity that we actually not focusing on growing food locally. But there's another question there for you as well. It says, last December, the European Union agreed on a law to ban agri-food imports, contributing to deforestation or from deforested areas, leading to a ban on most of the current produces imported from developing countries. What would be your approach to address the situation, given that the Dutch farmers are pushed out of business due to being unable to meet nitrogen-related regulatory compliance mandates? It's a very long one there.
Yeah, it's a very long one, and you see
Should
where
I just break it
policies,
down? Yeah.
the policies and diplomacy, really come in from, because what's happening to the farmers is that they are being pushed out. They are being pushed out because of the subsidies are going to different people. They're the ones who need the subsidies. They're the ones who are so important. Now, the deforestation and pulling in different things, part of that is, leads to that 30% waste of global food, because we want that on demand food, and it kind of goes back to the doctor's statement of that north and south divide. The north, we want food ready at all times, anytime, ready to go, and we're creating that waste. And we're creating, we don't want to eat just things that are in season. We want things to when we want them and how we want them. And what happens is it does start slowly creeping into deforestation, because now we saw the coffee, we see it in other things that are grown, because they're just wiping out avocados. They're just wiping out forests that they're avocados, because avocados become very popular now. And you know it all, when you start looking at it on a global level, you start seeing some of the cracks on there. We by going local, and getting to a point where we're eating in season again, and going and eating more things outside of just those 3 to 12 plant species, our health starts becoming better. Then more nutrition starts coming through, and so we don't have to these corporations go in and deforest things. That stops that. And it's I don't know if you would want to call it greedy or greed of the individuals who want food when we want it and out of season, but there is that greed of it. We want that, and we don't see it. It needs some education to understand what we're doing when we want stuff out of season. When we want things when we want it, we are really part of the massive problem. And
thank you so much for that. I really appreciate. I'd like to get on straight to Patricia to give us the closing remarks.
Oh my goodness! All right.
I think we've a little bit over extended so that should be really short and crisp.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.